Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual, and it seems it's the weekend, but it seems kind of Groundhog Day-y, right? Like the news is kind of the same. Lots of COVID, lots of loss of civil liberties, all of that kind of stuff happening, and the news is all I don't know what's the word. Let's think on that as we go through the news. Justin and Sophie got their shot. Somebody said, "Caption this." There was a video as well where he goes to hold her hand and she pulls her hand away. She's like, no, I don't need that. That's fine. Thanks. Thanks, Justin. I don't need your help. Moving on to, this is like, honestly, this might impact me. And maybe not. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe they're just targeting Rebel, right? But I feel like the YouTubers and people who are speaking about the things that we know the government doesn't like us speaking about, and I think I probably fall into that category, probably. They're trying to shut us down, really, just from like a government, like forget the YouTube censorship, forget the soft censorship of demonetizing people, forget the hard censorship of actually just removing the channel from YouTube, forget all of that. Like that's happened, right? That's happening. Removing people from Twitter, removing tweets from Twitter, locking people's accounts for saying certain trigger words or whatever. All of that is happening. That is happening in real time. But now the Canadian government is making a move to actually have like a blacklist, and they will just remove sites that they think that they don't like. But that goes against our Constitution. We have a right to freedom of expression. We have a right to our opinion, right? We have a right to have that. We have a right to express it. We live, and freedom of the press is a thing. So how can they say, well, this website doesn't qualify as press because maybe they're not accredited, or if they are accredited, the accreditation is lapsed because they're against the state security or something like that, right? That's the moves they're making. They're trying to make it so they can shut down websites and user-generated content on social media. And I don't know what they classify social media. I don't think it's just Facebook, etc. But Michael Geist is talking about this, and he's long been he's very credible with regards to online stuff. He's been talking about this for a very long time. He's a law professor and Canadian research chair in internet and e-commerce law. So he's always been writing articles about this for as long as I can remember. Like I remember reading about him in 1998 talking about PayPal and the impact on banks and e-commerce and how it's going to evolve and blah, 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 blah. Maybe not 1998, but around then. High schoolish for me. Anyway, last week, Geist says, I wrote that the Liberal government has become the most anti-internet government in Canadian history. It got worse today as it incredibly removes the social media exemption from Bill C-10, doing clause-by-clause committee review. Why the Liberals have become the most anti-internet government in Canadian history. The effect, says Geist, the CRTC would have regulatory power over all uploaded videos as programs under the Act. YouTube, Facebook, and any other site with user-generated content videos subject to CRTC rules. Massive expansion of free speech regulation in Canada. The Conservatives wanted more regulation too, but called for thresholds for regulating social media companies. Liberals voted to repeal the exclusion altogether, so all user-generated content could be subject to discoverability requirements or other CRTC regulations. So if you make a video like mine, now I'm subject to CRTC regulations, and I don't know what exactly that means. I have no idea. Like, I don't do anything. I don't even swear. I don't take the Lord's name in vain anymore. Like, because people ask me to, or not to, and that's fine. But I don't do anything that would be untoward or like, I think that I would be just fine on television. I don't talk about anything that is too crazy, except that I talk about things that the government doesn't want me to talk about. And so that's the key. But how do you balance that with a constitution that says I'm allowed to have my opinion? Even if the opinion is crazy, I'm allowed to have it. And I'm allowed to express my opinion. Again, even if the opinion is crazy, I'm allowed to express it. So how do you do that, right? And freedom of the press. How do you say this isn't news or this is news if that's what you want to suppress? How do you make that distinction? How do you make that classification? I'll be watching this closely. I'm interested to see if there's any YouTubers or anybody else who's going to be fighting this, because I'm interested, like Ezra Levent, etc. Are you guys going to be fighting this, right? What if you create your own news broadcast and put it up on your own website? Is that user generated? Because it's your own website is a product, right? Like it's not user, it's an administrator generated. Does that make it news? Can you disseminate your created news program on YouTube? Does that then make it subject to CRTC regulation? Like, Anyway, regardless, regulating user-generated content wasn't the only craziness at today's Heritage hearing, continues Michael Geis. This person here, Marcy Ian, inadvertently let the wrong motion slip, making a case for the CRTC to regulate apps. The government had previously said video games were off the table. So they're going to regulate apps. They're going to, manage the speech on apps. They're going to sell it to you like it's for your safety, comrade, right? Nope. The Postal Service in the US, I thought this kind of fit in here, is now monitoring the social media posts of Americans on Parler, Telegram, and other apps to look for inflammatory postings, and then they share it with other government agencies. This is ridiculous and dangerous. It must end immediately. They've institutionalized snitching. It's your job, Harold. You're just walking anyway. Just use the app and look and see if anything needs flagging, and then send it to the boss. What's the problem? You're just walking, delivering mail. You might as well look at the app. Right? Yeah. You've weaponized the Postal Service. This is wild. This is Randy Hillier. He says, this is not a police state. This police officer is foolish. This woman is very intelligent. And here we go. I hope this is loud enough. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, that's all right. Good as it can get.
Which exercising is one of them. Exercising is not allowed. What am I allowed outside of my house for? Could you explain that to me?
There's a list that's readily available.
You don't have that list? You don't have that list, but you're here charging me for something, but you don't know what's on the list.
I do know what's on the list.
Then could you explain it to me?
I'm not going to argue with you. You have your option. And that's...
Because you can't argue? Because you're charging me with no grounds whatsoever to charge me? I'm walking up and down the sidewalk.
The reason why you issued the ticket?
No, you didn't. I just asked.
And I just told you that this is not good.
Exercise. It's not like exercise. I'm not allowed to.
Exercising is
Well, I'm not just. Okay, so what about him? Are you gonna go give him a ticket because he's outside
we're
biking?
not going to argue. Okay?
Really? Okay.
You've been charged and you have your options, okay?
All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Which exercise?
So exercising, you are allowed out of your house for exercising. That is one of the reasons you're allowed out. I'm not going to bring it up, but I feel like that is an obvious thing. But this woman asks the police officer to explain it, and he doesn't. And he says, "I'm not going to argue with you. I'm sorry if it was a little quiet there. It's hard to tell if it's going to come across okay. It's been much better lately though, so that's good. The OBS is very, very helpful in that regard. But that was a quiet video, and so it is interesting to see when police have powers they don't necessarily understand, or when the law is muddy and people are supposed to stay home, but nobody knows exactly what that means, and police are out enforcing this stuff. It's not going to go well when police are enforcing draconian speech rules on the internet. Oh, have you seen the videos of the people in the UK being visited by the police there because they posted something not nice on Twitter to a politician, or not nice on Twitter, and the police are there? It's using up police resources when instead the police should be dealing with actual crime. It's criminalizing speech, online speech. And this is, I'm not saying that people should or even are currently abusing the freedom of online speech, but the government is saying that, and they're moving to make it, put it into the realm of actionable, right? Put it into the realm of sending police to the house to say, oh, well, you should really think about that. And, this could harm somebody, and blah, 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 blah. It's very, very scary what's going on. It's very scary. And the police aren't pushing back, and they should be pushing back. They really should be pushing back. Okay, getting into governance. This is Jonathan Vance's, the whole Vance situation. This is testimony that Katie Telford knew about the allegations and the ombudsman and did nothing. This is, if Katie Telford knew, then Trudeau knew. Okay, here we go.
National Defense on an issue relating to the CDS. At that time, I was senior advisor to the Prime Minister, working in the Prime Minister's office. I spoke with the Chief of Staff to the Minister of National Defense that same day. She advised me that the Ombudsman for the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces, who was then Gary Walburn, had initiated an unscheduled discussion alone with her minister. In that meeting, She told me that Mr. Walburn raised an allegation of personal misconduct against the CDS, and there were no other details provided. The important, sensitive, and unusual nature of this matter was immediately obvious to me, even in the absence of any details regarding the allegation.
So he knew how big a deal this was. He knew that this was massive, and it didn't go anywhere. And Telford knew, Chief of Staff, the Chief of Staff knew, Trudeau's Chief of Staff knew in 2018. If Trudeau's Chief of Staff knew, then Trudeau knew and did nothing, right? Everything goes back to Sijjan closing his eyes and doing nothing, resignation time, right? Everybody allowed nothing to happen. Everybody allowed this to continue. And if you believe the testimony of yesterday, the senior staff were aware of the relationship because she told them, right? A statement that appears increasingly accurate. Brennan said Vance told her he had Sijjan under control. And by extension, Trudeau under control. Sijjan got a raise in 2018 and Mark Norman got fired, right? And like dragged through the mud endlessly to the point where I was like, what is this even about? He built a ship? Really? Elder Marquez, former senior advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, is now testifying, this is 19 hours ago, about what he knew about the allegations against Vance in 2018. Elder Marquez has revealed that the Chief of Staff to Prime Minister, Katie Telford, so yes, it is Katie Telford, was aware that there were allegations against General Jonathan Vance. So, that's not great, right? Chief of Staff knows, the Prime Minister knows, everybody stayed silent. This just happened, says Laurie Goldstein. Trudeau dodges questions on Sijjan's future military accountability after explosive testimony. The explosive testimony is that Katie Telford knew. So what's going to happen? Is there going to be a cabinet shuffle? Is there going to be an election? I think an election would solve Trudeau's issues here. He could reasonably bury the Sijjan stuff, replace Sijjan because of, the election instead of disgrace, and have a statement, right, that says basically, we'll strengthen up the accountability and blah, 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 blah. They're never really taking any accountability for it, right, which is lacking in Canadian politics, accountability at every level. But anyway, that's a best case scenario for Trudeau. Worst case scenario is that he has to do a cabinet shuffle ahead of an election. I don't know. Is the budget going to pass? I don't know. How long did they debate the budget? I honestly don't know. I'll have to look into that. I was looking to see if they had voted on it, and they'd voted on a few amendments, like block requested amendments and stuff, but nothing. I don't think that anything was a confidence vote. As far as I know, I don't think the budget has been voted on as far as like, this is the budget. Usually that's a big vote. Usually that's headlines and things, right? I haven't seen anything like that. And I looked through the House of Commons feed back to the budget, and I haven't seen any votes other than some motions here and there from the bloc. No confidence motions, anyway, that I'd seen. Anyway, Laurie Goldstein says, Canada's COVID-19, this is travel related. COVID-19 travel rules, tragic farce. We've refused to shut down flights from COVID-19 hotspots until after deadly variants from these countries have arrived and spread. Even then, we didn't stop planes from coming in from some of these places. This is a Globe and Mail article. National Post article. India flight ban arrived just hours after Health Canada implied it was pointless. As it turns out, the variant has been here for weeks. Yeah, another lesson unlearned. Health Canada has a heck of a month last week. Its top docs and the minister responsible tried their best over and over to poo-poo any emergency measures to prevent or at least slow, the B167 COVID-19 variant's arrival on Canadian shores from India, where cases are soaring. Not for the first time over the past year, they looked foolish. As it turns out, the variant has already been here for weeks. In recent weeks, there have been 13 flights from Delhi to Toronto and 7 to Vancouver. Pretty much all of them wound up on the federal government's list of international flights with confirmed COVID-19 cases. I'll point out, Toronto has been shut down. The businesses in Toronto, the restaurants, the gyms, the dance schools, and all sorts of schools, and all sorts of other things have been shut down since like October in some instances. And we're still landing flights from international. Now, I think it's a distraction. They're using this, and I'm going to show you in the next slide, in the next tab. They're using this to now push for a recreational travel ban. They want to close the airports entirely, which is what I said a few days ago. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. But anyway, Toronto has been locked down. cases exploding, blah, 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 blah. All of these measures don't seem to be working. Why aren't they working? Oh no, what could possibly explain the fact that they're not working, right? Like, yes, that's, oh, okay, anyway. On Wednesday, British Columbia announced it had found 39 cases of the strain as of April 4th, but it hadn't bothered flagging them. B1617 is not yet listed as a variant of concern on Health Canada's daily epidemiological report, which is hilarious because they shut down travel based on it. Also on Wednesday, Quebec announced it had found its first case. Does finding the case just mean they start surveillance for that case? Like they stopped looking for the Brazilian variant because they said it's here and it's endemic. So does it just mean that they're now looking for these variants? I don't know. And then using the prevalence of these new variants to justify further restrictions. When did anybody agree to this? A year in, and having dictator health, medical officers of health decree new laws, it seems like we should have a say, like a democratic say in like how the laws are made and who gets to make the laws and how long they should be in effect for, things like all of the stuff that's happened in 2020 and into 2021. Yeah, I mean, we should have a say, shouldn't we? There should be some system, like we send somebody to a central location and then they vote on things. It should, these things really should be worked out, right? Thought we had these problems solved. Anyway, and then on late Thursday, the government went ahead and banned flights from India and Pakistan. At this point, Foolish doesn't even begin to cover it. On Friday, Public Health Ontario announced that it detected 36 cases of the strain in the last few days. At this point, Foolish doesn't even begin to cover it. Let's consider the arguments. The challenge with country-by-country approaches is that COVID spreads in ways that we can see and that we can't see. Health Minister Patty Haydu told Toronto Sun, "It's the safest thing for Canadians is to have a universal approach that requires scrutiny at the border. If the scrutiny in question were compellingly designed and proven effective, that might be true. It is neither, so it isn't. Obviously, a flight from India is orders of magnitude more risky than one from Taiwan, which is nearly COVID-free. Without banning flights entirely, we could have implemented a proper 14-day enforced quarantine weeks ago to fend off this not yet undisclosed new variant, and it might have made a difference, but that has not been the Canadian way." On Thursday, Dr. Howard Najou, TAM's deputy, wondered aloud if, at this point at all, it's nearly impossible to stop viruses from spreading because borders are artificial things, he told reporters hours before the flight ban came down. If you have a natural barrier like mountains or an ocean, it's different, but in Canada with a land border, it's easy for the virus to cross. Najou isn't wrong that it's easy for any strain of the coronavirus to cross the Canada-US border, even with credible safeguards against airborne arrivals, which we do not have. We would have had to get pretty lucky for none of the roughly 100,000 test and quarantine exempt travelers a week entering the country from the United States to bring an unwelcome variant along. But if that's the case, then why do we have this ludicrous mandatory hotel quarantine in the first place? That's the one you can just refuse to participate in at risk of a fine not much bigger than the cost of the accommodations. The one that lets you free after a single negative test on arrival, thus guaranteeing many false negatives will be released more or less on their own recognizance. The one more people are reportedly skirting by flying to northern U.S. airports and cabbing or walking across the border. Yep, people are doing that. And they can't stop you from entering Canada because that's a charter right, and they know it, and they have to allow that, right? It's crazy. Patrick Brown uses this to call for a stoppage of all flights, leisure air travel, as he calls it. Patrick Brown says, "Stop all leisure air travel internationally and domestically. The result of loose rules at the airport is more and more dangerous variants. You can still take a non-direct flight to any COVID-19 hotspot in the world. Hello, Transport Canada." Public Health Ontario says B1617 variant detected in 36 cases. The funny thing is, like, they know that it doesn't change. They know that it doesn't change the... Sorry, my mouse is being crazy. It doesn't change the likelihood of the transmission across the country, right, across the U.S.-Canada border or anything like that. And yet Brown is still calling for a reduction or stop all leisure air travel internationally and domestically. What an insane thing to call for. Wow, but they're using it. Just leverage it. Just go with it, right? Make up your mind, David Sweet. So this is an MP, and he says, we're experiencing the single greatest breach of our civil liberties since the internment camps during World War II. Absolutely no evidence that lockdowns work, but dozens and dozens of papers proving they don't. I'm saddened and appalled by my political colleagues' silence. And then Sweet goes, with variants of concern wreaking havoc around the world and with constant delays in vaccine supplies, the Liberals need to secure the border immediately. Healthcare experts, provincial leaders, and plain common sense are calling for it. Well, right? Are you calling for the removal of leisure flights, or what are you calling for there, David Sweet? Rosemary Barton says, Prime Minister says they have identified up to 100 doctors and nurses who can be deployed to Ontario if needed. This is a moment to all work together. Newfoundland has identified teams ready to go as early as next week. So let's take the people who work in hospitals and send them to other hospitals in the province to help. But we can't have flights, leisure flights anywhere. Nobody is allowed to move except for the people who we're moving, who are working in hospitals. We can't, and like, it's funny, like the doctors' offices, maybe I'll save this for the Rumble part of the video, because I'm going to talk about COVID, and YouTube doesn't like me talking about COVID and making points that it doesn't want me to make. So I'll talk about it on the Rumble side of things. But I just think it's interesting how willing we are to move people and like certain segments, but unwilling to allow other segments of the population to move. Very interesting. Very interesting, the travel restrictions that are coming down. I'll talk about what I was going to talk about probably later. Unsure about BC's travel zones? Here's a map to help you out. The province says those caught traveling between regions could be subject to a $575 fine. Residents will not be able to book accommodations or camping sites outside of their zone. This is lockdown. Like, this is a much more strict lockdown than what we had before. And this is, it starts out like, oh, are you unsure? Like, let me help you out because we're CBC News. And then it turns very quickly into like a bludgeon. Like, don't you dare leave your zone, citizen, or you're going to get fined, man. And you're not even going to be able to book it. How dare you leave your zone, right? Unbelievable. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. They're going to do this in Ontario too. You just watch. I hope I'm wrong. You just watch. It'll be unenforceable. They won't be able to police it. In BC, they can't police it. It'll lead to big, I mean, how many people work in a different health zone, right? People commute all the time in Ontario. And I don't know about BC, but this is very draconian, very, very, very scary. Can the NDP attract young voters in the next election with hashtag Eat the Rich? How much of the social media content is posted by Singh and how much is by his team depends on the platform. It's so cringy. It's so cringy, the NDP. And like the communism light stuff that they're pushing, it doesn't work. Like, you can sell it like it's really flashy and stuff with your Rolex and your really fancy suit, but it's not believable. It's not believable from the champagne socialists. You know, and the NDP didn't used to be like that. Like Jack Layton's NDP, I like Jack Layton. I like the NDP. Had he not died, I think he would have beat Stephen Harper and blah, 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 blah. But Tom Mulcair, yikes, right? Well, history. Anyway, the Champagne Socialist NDP, they're not my thing. They're not my thing. And I don't know that they're going to resonate. I don't know that they're resonating. Like, is Jagmeet Singh resonating? Do a lot of people like him? Do they think that he's a really good NDP leader? I don't know, but I don't think so. Massive spending. The Liberal budget cynically ignores healthcare transfers. It's an election budget. The argument is being made that it's an election budget. They go through the math of needing healthcare transfers and how Trudeau promised this in the past and blah, 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 blah. But it's an election budget essentially, and they'll campaign on it and blah, blah, blah. Will it be successful? Who else are you going to vote for? O'Toole? Right? So I hope they don't get a majority, but history is telling me they're going to get a majority, so I hope I'm wrong. And then after 4 years of that, maybe the Conservatives will replace O'Toole with a decent leader. But again, if history is any indication, they won't. So, and maybe Maxime Bernier will get 5% this time around. Who knows? Who knows? Ontario Parks, in the last story for the YouTube show, Ontario Parks vows to clamp down on scalpers reselling campsites at a steep price. If Ontario Parks become aware anyone has attempted to sell a reservation for a profit, the reservation will be cancelled, may be cancelled, and all applicable penalty fees will apply. Ontario Parks has vowed to crack down on people who are reselling campsite reservations at a steeper price amid an outcry from frustrated campers. Starting this Saturday, reservation holders will not be permitted to resell any reservations for profit, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, told the National Post in an email. We don't condone reselling Ontario Parks reservations for a profit, and we take concerns raised by our visitors seriously, it wrote, saying that it was aware of instances where individuals are attempting to sell reservations with the intention to make a profit. Campers have been trying to secure sites for the summer, with Ontario Parks seeing an almost 135% increase in reservations made between January 1st and March 28th this year compared to the same period in 2020. One campsite in Algonquin Park, for example, was listed on Kijiji for $240 for a 3-night stay, which would have cost $161, including tax, if booked through the Ontario Parks website. Now, MECP says that if it becomes aware anyone has attempted to sell a reservation for profit, such as listing the reservation on social media or buy and sell website, the reservation may be canceled and all applicable penalty fees will apply. MECP says they're also looking at new ways to make more campsites available for reservations to satisfy the growing demand. I mean, depending on how many campsites they have available, it seems kind of, freeing things up would be a good idea. They're probably not using their 100% capacity, so it would probably be beneficial to open up more campsites. But who knows what they'll be allowed to do, right? Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, or follow me over to Rumble and watch the rest of the show. Okay.